I was 8 years old when Julian shoved me down the stairs and shattered my wrist. He sobbed when our parents arrived, said it was an accident. I got grounded for starting it. That's how it always went in our house. Julian created the chaos. I paid the price. He was the golden child, the boy with the dazzling smile and clever excuses, the one who could do no wrong. I was the problem, the one who made things uncomfortable. Julian got away with everything, skipping school, stealing from Dad's wallet, disrespecting Mum to her face. They called it just being a boy. I got lectures for crying, for being too sensitive, too dramatic, too much. If I ever showed emotion, I was making a scene. If I defended myself, I was told I was the reason our house never felt peaceful. By 13, I learned to stay silent. My bedroom became my refuge. Door locked, headphones on, homework my only escape. Julian barged in whenever he pleased, took whatever caught his eye, mocked what he didn't want. Our parents barely glanced up. On birthdays, I received gift cards and stiff hugs. Julian got parties, noise, attention. Every year I disappeared a little more. When I turned 17, I packed 2 bags and walked out. No plan, no destination. I was finished pretending it was a home. Nobody came after me. Nobody called. It was like they'd been waiting for me to vanish. I survived on couches and part-time jobs, learned to live with nothing, got comfortable with silence. It wasn't freedom. Not yet. But it was close. Years later, when everything collapsed and I had nowhere left to turn, I made the mistake of reaching out. When the hotel shut down, they didn't even bother calling us in. Just a group email and a final paycheck that barely touched rent. I had 3 weeks to sort out my life. My flatmate packed and left within days, headed straight back to her parents. I didn't have that option. I sold what I could, donated the rest, used my last savings to buy a battered camper shell for my truck. It leaked when it rained, smelled like wet cardboard. But it was mine. I rang Mum, asked if I could park in their driveway for a few weeks. She hesitated, said they had too much going on. Julian and Sienna had moved in. The house was full. Sienna texted the next day. Hope the truck bed's cozy. I found a supermarket car park that didn't tow. Learned to stretch meals from a cooler and cheap instant food. I ran extension cords from church outlets when nobody was watching. Used the 24-hour gym for showers. It was the lowest point of my life. But in that quiet, I learned how to survive without asking. I learned what I truly needed, what I could endure. I learned to sleep through sirens and wake without fear. I didn't realize it then, but that camper they mocked was the first thing I'd ever truly owned. The job came through a friend of a friend, shipping warehouse in the next city. Not glamorous, boxes, forklifts, early mornings, late nights, but it paid above minimum wage and didn't ask questions. The manager, a weathered man named Ron with sun-creased skin and a smoker's laugh, glanced once at the camper on my truck and simply nodded. I parked near the rear fence where nobody looked twice. Nobody said a word as long as I showed up on time and pulled my weight. And I did. Every hour of overtime available, every weekend shift nobody else wanted. I had nowhere better to be. Work kept my mind from spiraling. When winter hit, Ron let me run a heavy-duty extension cord from the building so I could plug in a small heater. I told him I'd work Sundays for free to cover the electricity. He waved me off. I worked Sundays anyway. Bit by bit, I built up savings, bought new tires, replaced the camper's insulation, got a gym membership just for the showers. On weekends, I'd sit inside with a warm drink, listening to rain drum on the roof, feeling somehow safe. It wasn't just shelter anymore. It was mine. I kept my world small. No calls to family, no social media updates. I stopped caring if anyone knew I existed. That silence, once suffocating, had become my freedom. Months passed like that. Quiet, disciplined. Then one afternoon, after a long shift and a quiet walk back to my truck, I found myself staring at a listing on the break room wall. A house, small, close, affordable. I almost didn't take the number, but my hand moved before I could stop it. The house wasn't fancy. A 3-bedroom manufactured home with faded siding and a sagging front step. But it had plumbing. A real roof. Walls that could be mine. I put nearly every penny I'd saved into the down payment. I cried in the car park of the loan office after signing the papers. Not from sadness, from exhaustion, relief, disbelief. I didn't tell anyone for days. I just drove past it in the evenings, watched it sit quietly beneath the pale porch light, like it was waiting for me to come home. When I finally moved in, I slept on the floor that first night, wrapped in 2 blankets with a space heater buzzing beside me. Best sleep I'd had in years. The next day, I parked the truck out back and lowered the camper off the bed, cleaned it, covered it with a tarp, left it tucked near the fence. A quiet reminder of how far I'd come. A week later, on impulse, I posted a photo on Facebook. Just the porch light and house number. Caption, "Built this life from the back of a truck." I didn't expect anything. Got a few likes, a message from an old colleague, then silence. 3 weeks later, they showed up. Julian and Sienna, our parents, all standing on my porch like they were arriving at a family reunion. I never gave them my address. They never asked if they could come. I opened the door, stunned. They pushed inside before I could speak. They wandered through the rooms like tourists in a show home. Sienna whispered something in Julian's ear and giggled. Mum nodded, smiling. "You've got a lot of space for just one person," she said, running her fingers along the hallway wall. Dad stood in the kitchen, looking around like he was already rearranging the cabinets. I didn't say much, just followed them room to room. Heart pounding, mouth dry. It felt like watching a slow invasion. When they finally left, Julian lingered by the door, hand on the frame. "Let's talk soon," he said. "I've got something I think you'll want to hear." Julian came by the next afternoon, alone this time, to go cup in hand. That casual confidence he'd always worn like armor. He didn't knock, just tapped once and let himself in, like it was still our childhood home and I was just borrowing the space. "I've been thinking," he started, settling into my kitchen chair like it belonged to him. "This place makes sense for us. Closer to my job, better school district, you've got the extra rooms." He took a sip and smiled like he'd just offered me a winning lottery ticket. "Sienna's pregnant again, by the way, so yeah, we could really use the space." I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. It didn't come. "You'd still be here, obviously," he continued, waving his hand like this had all been pre-approved. "But we'd need the master for the baby. You could take the smaller room, or, honestly, just move back into the camper for now. You were comfortable in there before, right?" I said nothing. He leaned back, tapping his fingers on the table. There'd have to be some structure, of course. Quiet hours. No guests without clearing it with us. We'd split groceries, but Sienna cooks, so that's a win for you. That's when something in me snapped. Not violently, not theatrically, like a wire pulled too tight for too long. I stood, palms flat on the table, looked my brother in the face. "No," I said. He blinked, confused. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean, you're not moving in. You're not rearranging my house. You're not making rules. And I'm not sleeping in a camper so you and Sienna can play house in something you didn't earn." His smile faltered. "Celeste, be reasonable." "I've been reasonable my whole life. I was reasonable when Mum let you lie about breaking my wrist. I was reasonable when you borrowed my college fund for a business idea. I was even reasonable when you all left me living behind a warehouse and didn't care enough to ask where I was." He opened his mouth to say something else. I didn't let him. "This is my house. Mine. You don't get to come in and take it." Julian left without finishing his coffee, and for the first time in years, the silence that followed felt like something I had chosen. It was a Thursday afternoon when I pulled into the driveway and noticed something was wrong. My welcome mat was crooked. The porch light was on. The blinds in the living room, normally drawn tight, were open. I tried my key in the front door. It didn't fit. I tried again. Slower. Hand shaking. Still nothing. I walked around to the side and saw Julian's truck parked by the curb, tailgate down. Inside the house, through the window, I saw Sienna stacking boxes in my hallway, like she'd lived there her whole life. Julian appeared behind her, holding one of my blankets. They weren't moving in. They had moved in. I knocked hard. Once, twice. Sienna turned her head and smirked. Julian came to the door. Didn't even bother to look sheepish. "What are you doing here?" he said, like I was the one trespassing. "This is my house," I said, voice cold. He held up a folded paper, already creased and stained. "You signed this rental agreement. You said we could take the place for a while?" My name was scribbled at the bottom. The signature didn't even match. "You forged that," I said. Sienna came up behind him, arms crossed, belly slightly showing. "Don't be dramatic, Celeste. You left the door wide open. We just made it official." I pulled out my phone and started recording. Julian tried to block the lens. I kept filming. "You're trespassing," I said calmly. "And you broke my lock." Sienna lunged forward, slapped the phone from my hand. It hit the floor hard, still recording. I called the police. They arrived within 10 minutes. I showed my deed, the texts, even pulled up the Facebook post with the house number and date. Julian sputtered, tried to push the fake lease again. Sienna cursed at the officers, accused me of abandoning the property. It didn't work. They were ordered to leave immediately. The officers stood by as Julian and Sienna dragged their boxes back to the truck in silence, Sienna muttering threats under her breath the whole time. When the door finally shut behind me, the air inside was still warm from them. I locked it twice, stood in the hallway, heart racing, like the walls themselves needed to be reminded who they belonged to. I posted the video without a caption, just Julian waving that forged lease, Sienna slapping my phone, the sound of my voice, calm, steady, naming what they'd done. At first I thought nobody would care. Then the comments started. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years reached out. An aunt from California messaged, "Now it all makes sense. I always wondered why you disappeared." Even people from work saw it, said, "Good for you. That took guts." Meanwhile, Sienna vanished from social media. Julian went quiet. Our parents didn't post their usual Sunday brunch pictures. The silence on their end said more than words ever could. Then, one evening, our parents showed up on my porch. No warning, no apology. "Julian's going through a hard time," Mom said. "This is making things worse." Dad added, "You've proved your point. Can't you just let it go? For the family." I looked at them. For the first time, I didn't flinch. "I am doing this for the family," I said, the part that never tried to steal from me. They stood there, speechless. At that moment, Naomi, my cousin, pulled into the driveway. She stepped out and stood beside me. Without a word. That was the last time our parents tried to guilt me. And that weekend, I made a copy of the house key for Naomi. A week later, Julian texted me like nothing had happened. "Hey, can we talk? It's about the kids and rent." I agreed to meet him in the driveway. He showed up alone, hands in pockets, eyes darting everywhere but at me. He said Sienna wasn't working. The kids were growing fast. Formula and nappies were expensive. They'd just fallen behind. He didn't ask to move in again, just for money. Even a few $100 a month would help, he said, voice low, rehearsed. I didn't raise my voice, didn't get angry. I walked him through my spreadsheet, showed him the cost of property tax, insurance, the repairs I'd already done. Then I showed him a list of incoming tenants. I'd started renting out the back room and basement studio to 2 women from work. Quiet, respectful, paid on time. "I don't have money to spare," I said simply. "I didn't buy this house to become a bank for someone who tried to take it from me." Julian didn't argue. He just nodded, lips tight, walked back to his truck. A few days later, Sienna drove by and screamed out the window, called me a thief, a traitor, a cold, barren witch. I stood at the kitchen sink, watched her through the curtain, didn't move. The tenants arrived later that day with their suitcases and shopping bags. One of them baked bread, brought me a loaf without being asked. The other watered the lawn before work every morning. The house felt different now, full but quiet. Lived in, but peaceful. That night, I opened the tarp on the camper and aired it out. I didn't know it yet, but I'd need it again. Just not for me. The rumors started small. Whispers from people who knew someone who knew Sienna. A colleague, a neighbor. Then someone forwarded me a screenshot of a message thread that made everything clear. She'd been seeing another man, not recently, through most of her marriage. Julian didn't want to believe it. He denied it until the truth forced itself into daylight. The dates didn't match. The baby didn't look like him. A paternity test finally ended the guessing. The youngest wasn't his. When the results came in, something in Julian broke. Sienna didn't take it well. She threw things, screamed at him in front of the kids. When their oldest tried to step between them, she turned on him too. Someone called the police. They found her outside, barefoot and shaking, yelling into the night. She was taken in. Julian was left standing in the driveway, holding his son's hand. I didn't reach out, didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The divorce was fast. Sienna disappeared, supposedly to Arizona. She didn't take the kids. Julian moved back into our parents' house. I heard he barely spoke. Our parents stopped showing their faces at church. No more excuses, no more bragging. I sat on my porch that evening, warm drink in hand, listening to the quiet. Not happy, not angry, just still, just done. And then a few days later, Julian returned to my doorstep. Only this time, he wasn't asking for the house. Julian didn't knock this time. He just stood at the bottom of the steps, hands in pockets, eyes heavy. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. He didn't ask. "I'm not here to ask for the house," he said. "I know better." I waited. "It's for Luca," he added. "He's not sleeping well at Mom and Dad's. Too much noise, too many people. He asked if we could live somewhere quieter. He misses having space." I looked past him to where the camper sat beneath the tree, clean and unused. I thought of the nights I spent in there, shivering with a blanket pulled to my chin, pretending the thin walls made me safe. I thought of how that camper had taught me to survive when nobody else would help. "I'm not giving it to you," I said. "I'm not asking you to," he replied. I stepped off the porch and led him to the backyard, told him he could park it behind the house where I could keep an eye on things, that there would be rules, no loud visitors, no Sienna, no overnight stays from anyone he couldn't introduce face to face. I wrote it all down, made him sign it, recorded us shaking hands. Julian didn't argue. He just nodded, voice low. "Thank you. Really?" I didn't say anything back, just handed him the spare keys and walked inside. He moved in that evening. By morning, I heard the soft thump of a football in the grass. One night, long after the kids had fallen asleep, I heard a muffled sound from the camper. I walked out expecting to find something broken or spilled. Instead, I found Julian sitting on the camper floor, shoulders shaking, hands covering his face. "I ruined everything," he whispered. "I let her ruin us. And I let them ruin you." I didn't interrupt, didn't touch him. I let him speak until the silence stretched between us like a bridge we both knew we wouldn't cross. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said. "I just wanted you to know I see it now. All of it." I nodded once, then left him there with his grief. The days passed slowly. The kids stayed longer in my yard, helped water the garden, drew chalk pictures on the driveway, brought me flowers they picked from weeds. They never asked questions. They just stayed close. Our parents came by one Sunday afternoon. No speech, no defense, just quiet eyes and a tired look. "We were wrong," Mom said. "You didn't deserve it." For once, they didn't ask for anything in return.